In the turbulent story of the Wars of the Roses, most battles are remembered for the blood spilled on the field. But the Battle of Losecoat Field in March 1470 is remembered for something far more unusual: the secrets it exposed. It was a short, almost one-sided engagement in the Lincolnshire countryside, yet its political fallout shook the English throne to its foundations and sent two of the most powerful men in the kingdom fleeing for their lives. To understand why this battle even happened, we need to step back into the Powder Keg that was Edward IV's England. Edward had seized the crown in 1461 with the decisive support of Richard Neville, the Earl of Warwick, the man contemporaries and later historians would call the Kingmaker. Warwick was not a man who did anything quietly. He was enormously wealthy, politically cunning, and accustomed to being the power behind the throne. For years, he had expected to guide Edward's foreign policy and steer the kingdom as he saw fit. But Edward was no puppet. As he matured as a monarch, he pushed back. He made his own marriage, secretly, to Elizabeth Woodville, and began elevating her family to positions of influence that Warwick found both threatening and deeply insulting. By the late 1460s, the relationship between king and kingmaker had curdled into barely concealed hostility. Warwick had already attempted to destabilize Edward once before, backing a rebellion in the north in 1469 and even briefly capturing the king himself. Edward had recovered, but the wounds had not healed. Warwick was scheming again, and this time he had a far more dangerous co-conspirator: George, Duke of Clarence, Edward's own brother. George was ambitious, vain, and hungry for power, and Warwick had bound him close by giving him his daughter Isabella in marriage. The rebellion of early 1470 began in Lincolnshire, and on the surface it looked like a local grievance. Sir Robert Wells and his father Richard, Lord Wells, had a private dispute with a local nobleman that drew royal attention. Edward summoned them to court. Lord Wells complied and was placed under house arrest. But rather than quieting things down, tensions escalated rapidly. In early March, Robert Wells began openly raising troops and calling men to arms, not just as a local power play, but, as would soon become devastatingly clear, as part of a far larger design. He mustered somewhere around 30,000 men in Lincolnshire, an enormous force, calling on the Commons to resist the king. Edward, who had been gathering his own army in response, ordered the execution of Lord Wells and another nobleman, Sir Thomas de Moke, on the 12th of March, 1470, on the very morning he prepared to march. It was a brutal and deliberate message. The king was not in a mood for negotiation. Robert Wells now faced a terrible choice. His father was dead. The king was advancing with a royal army. Warwick and Clarence, who had promised to rendezvous with him and deliver their own forces to tip the balance, had not arrived. Despite this, Wells resolved to fight. The two armies met near the town of Stamford, in the flat, open country of Lincolnshire. What followed was less a battle and more a catastrophic rout. The rebels charged the royal lines with apparent initial confidence, shouting, according to some accounts, cries of "A Clarence! A Warwick!" slogans that were not lost on the royal commanders around Edward. The king's army, better equipped, more disciplined, and bolstered by artillery that tore into the rebel ranks, quickly gained the upper hand. As the royal guns opened up and the rebel formation began to dissolve, something extraordinary happened. The fleeing rebels, desperate to escape and unwilling to be identified by their livery, tore off their coats as they ran. The distinctive jackets and surcoats bearing the insignia of their lords were hurled aside in the mud and the grass of the Lincolnshire fields. This act of panicked self-preservation gave the battle its name: Losecoat Field. Some sources put it more poetically, the field of the lost coats. Men fled for miles, scattered across the countryside, abandoning everything that might connect them to the rebellion. Robert Wells himself was captured within days. Facing execution and almost certainly subjected to pressure or outright torture, he made a confession that turned a minor military victory into a political earthquake. He named names. He confirmed what those battlefield shouts of "A Clarence, a Warwick" had already suggested, that the rebellion had been orchestrated not by discontented Lincolnshire gentry, but by Warwick and Clarence themselves. The entire uprising had been designed to draw Edward into the field and destroy him, with Warwick and Clarence arriving at the critical moment to finish the job. They had simply failed to show up in time. Edward now had the evidence he needed. He wrote to Warwick and Clarence demanding they come to him and answer the charges. Both men knew exactly what such a summons meant. They wrote back with excuses. Edward pressed harder. They asked for safe conduct. Edward refused. And so, in the spring of 1470, the two most dangerous men in England turned their horses toward the coast and ran. Warwick and Clarence fled to France. It was a stunning fall from power. Warwick, the great kingmaker, the man who had helped put Edward on the throne and had terrorized English politics for over a decade, was now a fugitive. He arrived at the French court of Louis XI, a king of exceptional political cunning who must have smiled at the opportunities now presenting themselves. Louis would broker one of the most improbable alliances in medieval English history, a deal that saw Warwick, the champion of the Yorkist cause, throw his lot in with the Lancastrians he had spent years fighting. Warwick's daughter Anne was to marry Edward of Westminster, the Lancastrian prince. The Kingmaker was going to put a different king back on the throne. Edward IV, meanwhile, appeared to have emerged from the crisis in a position of remarkable strength. The rebellion had been crushed with speed and efficiency. Robert Wells was executed. The conspiracy was exposed. His greatest domestic enemies had been driven out of the country, but appearances were deceptive. Within months, Warwick and Clarence would return with a French-backed invasion force, and in one of the most dramatic reversals of the entire Wars of the Roses, Edward himself would be forced to flee England. He would spend time as a refugee at the Burgundian court before coming back to reclaim his throne in 1471. The Battle of Losecoat Field, then, is a pivotal but often underappreciated moment in the Wars of the Roses. In terms of casualties, it was not a great slaughter. There was no Towton here, no frozen river running red with thousands of dead. It was a brief, lopsided engagement in a muddy field that was over almost as soon as it began. But the consequences rippled outward in every direction. It ended any illusion that Warwick could be managed or contained within Edward's court. It confirmed that Clarence was willing to commit treason against his own brother for the right opportunity. It sent both men into exile and set in motion the final, violent confrontation that would effectively end the Wars of the Roses. The campaigns of 1471 that would see Warwick killed at the Battle of Barnet and the Lancastrian cause annihilated at Tewkesbury. And it all began with a rout so complete that grown men, veterans of the endless civil wars that had torn England apart for a generation, threw off their coats and ran as fast as their legs could carry them across the flat fields of Lincolnshire. The coats they left behind told the king everything he needed to know. The colors, the badges, the symbols of allegiance scattered in the mud. They were the physical evidence of a conspiracy that had been hiding in plain sight. Edward IV had not just won a battle at Losecoat Field. He had torn the mask off a plot that would reshape the final chapter of the Wars of the Roses. History remembers the great battles for their death tolls and their turning points. Losecoat Field gave us something rarer, the moment a conspiracy unraveled in real time, one abandoned coat at a time.